Like, who would think that what was happening was actually happening unless someone told you? But it wasn't until I started walking a few blocks away that something about that just seemed odd, and I turned around and I kept on looking to see if there was any police choppers, and that's when I saw the second plane hit.
Meet Palle Bo, a full-time traveler and digital nomad from Denmark on an epic journey around the world. This is the Radio Vagabond.
What you're hearing in the background is the water streaming down into one of the two square pools that are located on Manhattan, exactly where the World Trade Center was until exactly 20 years ago to this minute. It's right here at what became Ground Zero, and now it's the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. The museum is located underneath, downstairs, and I was just down there and spent a couple of hours walking around. It is so respectful, so unique, and so well done, this museum. And I really highly recommend that you spend a couple of hours if you go there. And another thing, when you go, make sure that you get the app that goes with the museum, because there are some audio narration. Some of it is recorded by Robert De Niro, who was also in the area when it happened. And it's a very good companion to your visit to the museum. Downstairs, right underneath where the World Trade Center Twin Towers were, until exactly 20 years ago when this episode comes out. Here in New York, I'm staying in Brooklyn and in an Airbnb with two other people. And one of them is a guy in his mid-40s, and exactly 20 years ago, he was a young man in his mid-20s, and he came off the subway just minutes after it happened. In a few seconds, you can hear Douglas tell his story. My name is Palle Bo. This is a special bonus episode of The Radio Vagabond.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. Whenever you need a hotel anywhere in the world, go to Hotels25.com. That would get you the best price. Hotels25.com searches a bunch of the biggest hotel sites in one simple search. Hotels25.com.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Clearly something relatively devastating happening this morning there.
At the time, I worked for a .com that was located on Franklin off of Chambers. So New Yorkers would know what I'm talking about. And so that's only like a few blocks away from World Trade Center. So that morning, I was actually supposed to go to One Trade Center because I was an engineer. And back then, there was like a big technology that was kind of new on the scene called XML, XXL. And so given that I was out of college and I was a full-time worker, if you want to learn new technologies, you had to pick up books. You had to do a lot of reading. And so I do remember to this day that I was living in Brooklyn, and I decided that I was going to go take the 6 train, and I was going to go to the Barnes & Nobles that was in World Trade 1, pick up a couple of books, and just walk up a couple of blocks to work. I'm on the train. I'm running late. I get off at Brooklyn Bridge. And I decide before I get off the train that, I'm running too late. There's no, let's not bother. Let's go direct to work. And maybe during lunch, we'll just go down and get the books and come back. And as I get out, I notice everyone looking up at World Trade. But in that area, as it is today, back then, it's touristy. So I assumed that these were just tourists looking at stuff. I didn't really pay them no mind. But I started noticing that there was a lot of people looking up. It's one of those things where it was like 2 or 3 people, like, whatever. But then I started noticing that everyone is looking up in the direction of World Trade. And so I looked up and I saw the hole where the first plane went into.
It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft. We have no idea how many were on board or what the extent of the injuries are right now.
My immediate assumption at that moment was that some poor helicopter guy, maybe from a news network, It was a little bit windy that day, so I was like, maybe he lost control, crashed into the building. That's messed up. That's crazy. But I kept on walking up to work. Like, who would think that what was happening was actually happening unless someone told you? But it wasn't until I started walking a few blocks away that something about that just seemed odd, and I turned around and I kept on looking to see if there was any police choppers, and that's when I saw the second plane hit.
So you have no idea right now?
There's another one. Another plane just hit. Right, oh my gosh, another plane has just hit. It hit another building. Flew right into the middle of it. Explosion. My God, it's right in the middle.
And that's when it kind of dawned on me, like, okay, something is going on, because that's an actual airplane. That's not a helicopter. That's not a weathercopter. That's an actual airplane that's happening. And so I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on. I'm already pretty close to the office. I just need to turn the corner. But let me just go into the office, immediately go online. Granted, these were the very relatively early days of internet, but still news was pretty quick online anyway. And so let me just jump online and see if there's any news about what's happening. I get there, the office is completely empty. And understand that this was a .com, so back then we owned the entire brownstone. Usually it would already be bustling with people working and engineers and salespeople, but the entire thing was empty. And that was like my second or third clue that, okay, something odd is really happening, because this place is completely empty. I'm like the only person in the entire building. And that's when I went online, and that's when I started hearing the reporting that it was a terror attack. Trying to collect my thoughts, like, what do I do? You know, what's the best thing I can do right now? So I get out and I go back down to try and help. Complete chaos, just absolute craziness. Soot everywhere, debris everywhere, people just running around trying to figure out what to do. And I still remember to this day the thing that in retrospect just kind of pissed me off as I was going down there were the people who were taking photos with their cameras. And I'm like, there are people dying and you're already kind of recording this like it's some kind of, you know, spectator sport event like the US Open or a basketball game. Like, no, there are literally people dying right now. Either get out of here or come and help, but you shouldn't be here with your camera phones and all that kind of stuff just taking photos like it's a freaking family vacation. And so I get down there and I'm helping out, and a police officer grabs me and tells me, hey, get the hell out of here, because he's trying to get people out the way, whether you're trying to help or not. He's like, just clear the space, just get out. And I remember that I was not pushed up Broadway. I was like a block away where you can clearly see the World Trade Center now. And I'm walking and I'm just trying to figure out what to do, but I'm walking backwards because I'm looking at the World Trade. I'm looking at all the smoke and all that kind of stuff. And I remember being around Chambers Street, around the 1-2 train stop, when the World Trade came down. And I remember just looking straight down alley and watching the whole thing come down. And it was one of those life-changing moments where it was like, holy crap, this is actually happening. This is real life right now. And so the World Trade comes down, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I was in total shock. I didn't know what to do. Do I go back? Do I go up? Where do I sit? What do I do? I mean, you're just completely in a daze of what's happening when you see. I mean, understand, I'm a native New Yorker, so I grew up with the Twin Towers. I grew up with that. I used to go to concerts there. I used to have friends who would work down there. We would just go and hang out. That was like a hangout spot when we were younger. Even though we lived in Brooklyn, we would just go. You know, if I had friends who lived in the city, another friend who lives in Queens, we'd go hang out at Twin Towers. You know, there was a whole concert series that would happen there during summers and so it became like a part of my childhood with my friends to go to these concerts. That would happen at least every Thursday, but sometimes that would even happen every day at a particular spot in front of the Twin Towers. It was like a huge cavernous area where people just hung out and ate and just chilled, and then sometimes they were used for concerts. So it was like really important spot in my childhood, and I just remember just watching it all just crumble, and that's when it really hit me that this is some next level shit that's happening right now. And so we're just walking, when I say we, I mean everyone who's kind of in that vicinity, who just saw what just happened and realized exactly what, the enormity of the moment. We're all in a daze. We're really just all in a daze, trying to figure out what to do. They stopped cell phone service, so we couldn't use the cell phones to call anywhere. So that entire area just became like a dead spot. And so people are trying to find payphones to use. But, even though this wasn't the height of cell phones like it is today, it was pretty close to that. And therefore, it was pretty rare for you to have a quarter to use a fucking payphone. So people are looking for change. People are trying to call people to let them know that they're okay, or they're, in essence, just trying to make sure to get in touch with their families. People in restaurants, or rather owners of restaurants, are asking you to come in for shelter to protect themselves. It was just utter and total chaos. And I remember just kind of wandering. Then I finally realized that I was thirsty, that I had not eaten anything yet. And I was finally starting to feel a little thirsty, and I went to a restaurant and they gave me some water. And then I went back out, just kind of walking around trying to figure out what to do. Let's try and get home. But subways were closed, buses were closed, so we had to walk over the Brooklyn Bridge to get home. One of the things that was happening is, in all of the chaos, clearly rumors and stuff started to fly. And one of the rumors that started to permeate the group of everyone who was kind of walking over the bridge was that there was going to be another attack, and they're going to attack the bridge. And so now people are there are a group of people who are just trying to get over the bridge as fast as possible. They're running, they're knocking people over, they just want to get off the bridge and I totally understand it, because you have no idea what's going on.
And that's an iconic landmark as well.
Exactly. You have no idea what's going on. You're completely, you have no internet. The only way to get news is if you're in an area, or rather in a particular spot with a TV, but we're not. We're clearly over the bridge. And these are just people desperate to get off the island or to go home. So it's just two groups of people, just get off the island, which is get off Manhattan, or you live in Brooklyn, and therefore this is the only way for you to get home. So we're walking over the bridge. People are running. People are trying to figure out, what to do. Is it true? Is it not true? They're looking out for planes and all that kind of stuff. And, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm walking at a hurried pace, but I'm not running either, because there's a part of me that's like, it didn't sound right that they would, come after a bridge per se, but in retrospect, it could have been totally true. It could have been totally true. Like you said, it's a landmark area, and if they're using planes, what's to stop them? It's not, there's no force field around the bridge. So I make it over to the other side. Thankfully, back then, I lived in Crown Heights. So Crown Heights, Brooklyn, once you get off the Brooklyn Bridge, if you're walking, it's about maybe another 30 minutes for you to walk home. And we have to walk. Again, there's still no buses, still no trains, everything's shut down. So I have to walk the 30 minutes. To this day, I don't even remember that space of walking, getting off the bridge and making it to my friend's house, because you're completely in shock, in a daze. And during the whole time, I'm thinking to myself, why? Who could have done this? Just what's going to happen next? Are they gonna come for buses, or they come for trains? A part of me started thinking about all the other really vulnerable spots that they can come for, in addition to the Twin Towers. And eventually I made it home, and I told my mom that I was okay, because I was still, we were still living together at the time. And eventually things kind of tapered down, and everything that you've heard kind of transpired after the fact transpired. in Brooklyn, there's an area called the Brooklyn Promenade, which is basically one big boardwalk that looks over into the city. And kind of another part of it being, I'm getting goosebumps just saying it, is that growing up, that used to be a great spot to hang out, take dates on when you were a kid and all that kind of stuff. And a prominent part of that view was the Twin Towers. And I remember, and I'm trying not to tear up, I did not go to the promenade, and I used to hang out there with my friends all the time. I did not go to the promenade for like 5 years after that, because I couldn't stand the sight of the city without the Twin Towers.
No.
And I remember when I first went back, I just cried, because I grew up with those towers, And, this is true for everyone. I think New Yorkers sometimes may overblow this a little bit, but where you grew up is a part of who you are. And there are specific things and specific locales that are important to you, especially in your childhood. And so it took me years to go back and to just look at the city. And so that's why when you said, hey, I'm going to the 9/11, I'm like, I'm not interested in seeing that.
Yeah, you've never been there.
No, I've never been to the memorial. Many, many years later, I actually, funny enough, worked in FIDI, and I worked in one of the new World Trade Centers many, many, many years after the fact. But accepting that job, a big part of it was me trying to figure out if I could handle me downtown in that area. Eventually I did, and it was where I met, 3 of my best friends in the world. We're still best friends to this day. But it was hard because, they were building the memorial during the time I was working at First World Trade. I guess it's First World Trade now. And so, yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I try not to think about often. And yeah, I'm to this day, I miss the Twin Towers because it was iconic New York. And yeah, so that's my story. I'm sure there are more stories about people who survived 9/11, who were down there when it happened, who were, people who were just in the stores. It was a thing.
Thanks for sharing.
No problem, man. No problem.
My name is Palabo, and I gotta keep moving. See ya.
Produced by RadioGuru.co.uk.